Okay. So this is our 18th session on this topic. So I guess we're at our midterm exams next week. We've been covering quite a bit of ground. And for those of you who haven't been here before, we're right now covering the Lamrim Chenmo. So it's the stages of the path to enlightenment. And this is a teaching that by Lama Tsongkhapa that really took and explained Atisha's path. Atisha was this great master who went and studied all of the Buddhist paths and lineages and then brought them in a systematic way to be presented so that it can really understand where you are on the path, and it can speak to different people at different levels. And so within this teaching, there's three types of people that this is directed at. So they have the sort of beginning motivation, the intermediate and the advanced, sometimes called the small scope, middle scope, and great scope. And we're wrapping up the middle scope, the intermediate teachings for those on the intermediate motivation. Sort of the unique feature here is that with this type of system, literally from how to set up an altar to enlightenment, it's all there. There's the next step. Here's how it's evolved. Here's where it fits. And if you're whatever practice someone's doing, whether it's a Zen or a Theravadan or whatever, a Tibetan, you can say, oh, that fits right here. You know, that's part of this teaching. And so we've covered a lot of ground. We went through the whole preparatory practices. We went into those of a beginning motivation. So for the beginning motivation, it's really the idea that my life could be better. There's a lot of suffering. And really the idea that my next life, I want to really continue a good path. So really a good focus on refuge and on ethics. The second intermediate level that we've been covering is the idea that, hey, I don't want to suffer anymore, period. That's pretty good. So the idea that I do not want to be stuck in a conditioned existence limited by mental afflictions and continually being subject to limiting amounts of rebirths and karma that's dragging me around, habits and conditions, that I can be liberated, that I can attain nirvana. And so with that in mind, we've covered, well, is there a problem here? Because if there isn't a problem, we're really not going to do much work to do anything about it. If my life feels pretty good, it's probably going to be very difficult to put some effort in. And so we looked a little more deeply at the life that we have, and we may have noticed that what we think is really good is just a momentary absence of suffering rather than a sustainable way of being. That, wow, when we get those moments where it's all okay, this is great. And we have a moment, or a little moment. And then you know what happens? I think, well, how can I keep this moment? What if, you know? And then my mind goes on to worrying about how to maintain that, what's going to be next. And these things that we often think or perceive will be something that can give us a lot of joy and happiness are actually at the core the root of much of our suffering, anxiety, and fears. And so we kind of delved in that. We looked at mental afflictions. We looked at how they arise, and we looked at their causes. And we spent some time noticing our desires, attachments, our pride, things that get in there, and how that creates problems in our lives. And how, when we really look at our life, see how much we're subject to stress, worry, fear, anxiety, what others might think of me. And what about our own sense of well-being, that I'm okay, or that maybe I'm not good enough, or that I'm a bad person, or I could be a better person. A lot of mental afflictions. And from a Buddhist point of view, those are all unnecessary. Our true nature is pure. We have all the enlightened qualities here now. And so looking at that, I thought, well, let's make a determination for liberation. Let's look at, if I can look at the cause of my suffering. So the first two noble truths are the truth of suffering. And by suffering, we don't mean, again, physical and mental suffering at all levels. It's really much closer to an unsatisfactoriness, because we don't feel like we're suffering maybe right now. I mean, I feel pretty good. But my body's aging. I'm subject to injury, illness, and so forth. I don't, everything about this life is conditioned to, at one level, birth, aging, sickness, and death, right? Everyone I know is going to leave me. Everyone I love is going to be gone. This body's going to come and go. And in that level, even if it feels pretty good right now, it ain't going to last. As a matter of fact, it may not last an hour from now. And every desire that gets satisfied, well, that just creates an angst for something else, And so it looks at it and says, well, let's look a little more deeply. Is there a way of being that can actually have a sustainable sense of wellness, of wholeness, and not having those mental afflictions arise? And so we did a little talk and watching about how they arise and how they arise in dependence upon certain conditions and what we can do about that. Which brings us to today. Today says, well, how about let's not make them arise? How about let's get off of the idea of unsatisfactoriness. Let's get off the idea that my life is conditioned, that there is this suffering, that there's a cause of it. Well, guess what? How about cessation of suffering? How about none of this? How about really setting a course of liberation, of nirvana, of peace, of well-being? And so that's our topic now, which is becoming, I want to get the technical, becoming convinced of the nature of the path to liberation. So first two noble truths are, that there is this unsatisfactoriness, that there is this karma that limits us, that no matter how good we feel, we're still subject to aging, sickness, death, anxiety, fears, worries, these concerns that happen. There's a cause for them. Well, if there's no cause, there's no result. So let's get rid of the cause. Let's really look at the cessation of suffering. And the third noble truth basically says that, is that if there's no cause, there's no result. That we can actually remove the cause of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is that path. And so this is, let's become convinced that this path is beneficial, that it's something worth walking. It's something worth putting in some effort. So if we remember that at the root of all of the afflictions, of all of the mental sufferings, is really a misperception of who I am, of who you are, of how I interact. Often it's just called ignorance. That's such a harsh name, right? But a misperception. It's a misperception. It's a misunderstanding. It's a way of, I really see and identify with this body in a way that isn't accurate. It's not accurate. And I perceive a lot of qualities in you that aren't very accurate. And I'll touch on that in a moment, but I'm going to read a little quote by Venerable Tenzin Palmo that we posted today, and I think it speaks this pretty well. It's very important to remember that we all have Buddha nature. That cannot be emphasized enough. We, all of us, are in the depths of our beings, the combination of wisdom and compassion. That's our true nature. Our tragedy is that we identify basically with all the wrong things. We identify with our conceptual mind, our gross mind, our race, our gender, our professions, the roles that we are playing, our memories, our childhood, things which happened. We identify with our hopes and our fears and our plans. We live in our conceptual thinking mind, and we think this is who we are. And the great insight, the great breakthrough of the Buddha was to recognize that everything that we normally identify with is exactly who we are not. And it's also our tragedy, because while it's fine to play a role, we all have to play roles. But if we believe in that role and think that's who we are, then we are in trouble. An actor may play a brilliant actor on stage, but if he comes off stage and still thinks he's Hamlet, this is a problem. The problem is we don't recognize our true nature. And so that is really at the core of all of Buddha's teaching, is basically to see reality. So everything is about seeing the truth. Dharma literally means, the nature of reality. And so how do we see that? How do we start to understand and get a direct realization that this body is not who I am? It's not easily done, right? Because it feels pretty solid, right? And if you hit me with a hammer, it's going to hurt. And I'm going to be really attached to not feeling pain. I'm going to feel really solid. That's going to be the sense of the problem. And I'm going to be very attached to this. And my job, my labels, who I am, my childhood memories, these identity that we're so embedded with. It's a pretty strong barrier to get through, to start to realize that I'm not actually those things. Those are experiences I'm having. Right? This body's here. I'm experiencing it. But it's not the totality of who I am. And the body's changing. Who I am is changing. I am not the kid I was when I was 10. But I have the memory of that. And how I perceive you is in dependence upon how I've lived my life, and how we perceive others. There are qualities that we put on them. That's a jerk, that's a cool person, that's somebody who's funny, that's somebody who's nice. And these are all labels, right? And somebody else would think, well, that person he likes a jerk, and that person's not funny, and this person is. And look at how the labels that we go. And then look how we perceive people, and then we make it really concrete, right? And we think that's who people are. The tragedy of Bill Cosby, right? If you followed that. Bill Cosby, when I was growing up, that's the guy I admired. He was someone that was the role model of family life and solid African American. And we find out something else, right? Now, is he this something else? And is that something else the only thing he is? Or does that wash away all the good that he did? In truth. And how I think about him is different now than it was. But has he really changed? And think about how we do that with everybody in our life. Wow, you're a really cool person. You're a close friend. I love you. And then you do something. And then, man, I really hate you. I can't stand you. What's really changed? How we perceive and interact in the world, and those labels that we stick are not very accurate. They're not very accurate at all. And this is how we kind of crack the door a little bit to start to see that how I'm living in the world is not very accurate. So maybe I can't go immediately to seeing the empty nature of myself and you, but I can start paying attention to little things. Little things like there are no jerks in the world, there's humans. And humans do lots of things, as we've mentioned before. Everybody in this room has done things that are harmful. And everybody in this room has done things that are wonderful. But are we a bad person or a good person? And do those labels work? Are we humans? And every human you meet is trying to do the best they can with what they have. They're trying to find happiness. And some have a lot of afflictions. They create a lot of harm. But even some of those people have probably done good things. So when they're a little kid, wanted to be loved and cared for like us. We don't always see all that in people, right? We see somebody, they're like this or they're like that. And then I find out this one thing about this one person, and that becomes cemented as to who they are. And every time I think of it, or that person I didn't like when I was 10, they bullied me. They're mean. And the rest of my life, I carry that image. And so, these little things we can start to pay attention to, that maybe I'm not really interacting in the world quite accurately. Maybe I have some filters. Maybe I have some biases. Maybe I'm making things concrete that aren't really so concrete. And maybe this world is a lot more dependent upon my attitudes, my feelings, how I am today. My experience of the outer world has a lot to do with how I'm living my life. And yet I keep thinking, if you all would just straighten up and fly right, I would be happy. Would you please buck up? When in truth, if I start living differently, all of you change. And that's a very interesting piece of wisdom here. The world that we see has a lot to do with how we're living our life, the world that we experience. And you'll find it's going to be a lot more accurate. So when we talk about wisdom, it comes in stages and it comes in steps. But and when something seems like, wow, that's a really hard thing to grasp, well, there's some simple things to grasp. People say, like, I have like non-self. That's this ultimate nature of reality, non-self. I was at a retreat, and a friend of mine was trying to describe it, and she said, I couldn't even begin to try to describe non-self. I'm no great master. I don't know the nature of reality. And I said, well, I bet you can, in the way it manifests. So a sense of saying my non-self, the way I don't exist, is if I get really angry, I'm not my anger. But I really feel like I am when I'm angry, right? But my anger will come and go, and I'm not here. Yeah, I'm still here. My happiness will come and go, and I'm still here. So one way of really experiencing non-self is to understand that I am not my feelings. They'll come and go. They're transient. Wow. Hey, well, that's a little different way of looking at me. And if we look at the way I used to think about myself, I had a speech impediment. I couldn't talk very well. Well, I can speak now. That's changed. So the way that we see ourselves able to change. So there's a sense of how we are that changes, that we can realize. My body's changing every day and every moment. And that's different. So we can start paying attention, and we can start noticing that certain things that we think about ourselves may not be accurate. Okay? The common example I use a lot is I used to think, I'm not very good at language. I don't hear tones very well, and I had a speech problem. And so, how am I going to learn a foreign language? I get in a monastery in the south of India where everybody speaks Tibetan. It's amazing how quickly I start picking up Tibetan, because you need to eat, need to know where the bathroom is, and need to know what you're supposed to do next. So suddenly you're learning Tibetan, But my perception was one thing, my reality is another, that we're changeable. Things change, and even science is showing all this, right? We can create new neural pathways. We can really change our physiology, actually, and how our genes really, not the genes themselves, but how they manifest. It's just the ones that show up in certain ways. So these are ways that we can start to see that how I see myself is maybe not entirely accurate. And so we want to crack the door. We want to start seeing things. So how I appear to you, right? And we talked about that. How we appear to each other is independence upon others, right? If we, right now, the idea is I'm appearing now in dependence to this situation as a Dharma teacher. A little while ago, I was a commuter. A little while ago, I was a husband. A bit ago, I was a consumer. These labels come as dependence upon the situation. But I'm none of those labels. But we'll really identify with those labels. Our profession, our job, and those labels come and go. I'm not a monk anymore. Not that label either. Things change. So it is, let's start living life more accurate. Know that these labels don't totally identify us. But they suit a purpose. Like they're saying, there's roles that we play right now. There's roles. a Dharma teaching. That's accurate. That's what's going on right now. But that won't be accurate maybe in about an hour. And then there'll be another label that'll appear. And so, but our mind doesn't go through that normally. We're really habituated to who I am, how I feel, what that person's like, and we even have sometimes decisions made up before we've even entered a room. You know, this meeting's really going to suck. This phone call is going to be a hard one. Oh, I'm really looking forward to this person. Hasn't even happened yet. I have it made up. And then things change. So this reality that we're projecting upon the world is really coming from a misperception of self and how things are. And so if we really want to get liberated, the path is to see things as they are, to see the nature of reality. And if I see the nature of reality, I'm not going to create causes that are going to create suffering, because that would be ridiculous. And why would I do that? Nobody wants to suffer. And so the idea then is I've looked a little closer at how I'm living my life, and I would like to live it with less suffering. And so I'm going to start being more accurate. I'm going to start seeing more clearly. In order to do that, then there's the what they call the Fourth Noble Truth, which is an eightfold path. We've done a pretty complete teaching on that in the past. But ultimately, it comes down to what we call three higher trainings. Okay, three higher trainings. Ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And so we want to be convinced that this is the path to enlightenment. This is a path to nirvana. This is a path to no more suffering. Now, as we've talked about pretty much in every single talk we have here, is we're not asking for blind faith. Not going to work too well. Test things out and see if it works. So we want to see if it makes sense. We try it out. So if we're going to be convinced that this path is it for us, we need to try it out, and we need to see if it makes a difference. And the beautiful thing about the Buddhist path in my mind is that while I have the goal of complete Buddhahood, full enlightenment, well, what I've discovered is if I'm working towards that, even for people who don't believe maybe in all of this yet, their life gets better now. That you're going to find common sense, and that's what a lot of psychology and neuroscience find out. Well, this Buddhist path is like the science of the mind. It's looking at what are your mental afflictions, how do you live your life more accurately, and how do you feel better, right? That's the result. So the results that happen along the way benefit you now. So you know, you might find benefit now, and then that faith may develop to the end. So we're at the intermediate. We're at the idea that, hey, I can remove my suffering. I can really look at my mental afflictions, and I can obtain the state of nirvana, or I can be liberated from karma, from conditioned existence. And that's what we want to motivate. But how are you going to know that right now? Because I told you so? Because there's a book that says that? Because somebody, you know, said that there was a Buddha that was, you know, almost 2,600 years ago? No, you're going to know it by your own personal practice. And so here's a path. And you want to check into, is there a teaching and a teacher that can demonstrate something like that actually doesn't have a lot of mental afflictions, that actually you know, embodies some of this. So unfortunately, you're stuck with me here. But I have met teachers like this. And July 18th, there'll be another one. So, but what we can see is that, well, here's some a lineage and people that have maintained a lifestyle that have obtained a way of being that seems to be accurate. And we try it out, so we have some faith. But we want to try it in ourselves. So first on this list is, all right, before we get right into that is, as we enter into this, we want to make a distinction. So it's what we call a technical note. That will make a lot of sense later, if not now. So within Buddhist teachings, there's the path to enlightenment. So there is the difference between what they'd say liberation and enlightenment. Okay, we're really at a stage of liberation. Liberation is nirvana, and they say so. This would be the idea that I don't want to suffer. I want to be liberated. I don't want to create karma. I don't want to be subject to rebirth again and again. Okay, nirvana. So they would call that liberation. And in order to be liberated, it's really the seeing and experiencing the nature of reality for a sustained period of time. You'll have a direct experience of the actual nature of non-dual existence. And if you do that for a sustained period of time, you're going to become liberated. But you wouldn't be fully enlightened. So this is Tibetan view. This is a Vajrayana path. So they would say that there's two types of these obscurations that prevent us from being enlightened, because as Tenzin Palmo says, we already have it. We already have our nature. It's just covered up. It's layered in with karma and mental afflictions and misperception. If we get rid of that, our nature is already enlightened. It's already there. But we keep piling on mental afflictions and attachments and aversions and pride and anger. So we keep covering it up. We keep mucking it up. So it's already here, and it's, according to this path, then it says that there's these types of obscurations that are called mental. Let's see, what would we call it technically? Afflictive obscurations. Afflictive. So afflicted obscurations are what we're really used to experiencing, the way I perceive myself, this body, and how I see you as different from me and independent, self-existent, anger, resentment. All that stuff we've been talking about. If we can cut through that with wisdom, we can obtain nirvana. And nirvana means I see things as they are. And so I'm not really going to create any conditions to be subject to conditioned existence anymore. But it's not quite fully enlightened. So the description of it is, what's a good one? Okay. So they often use these analogies. They would say that there's these cognitive, which are the deeper ones. It's like a common thing that they'll use is like if you boil onions, right? You boil onions in a water. Well, you can take the onion out, and that would be the afflictive obscurations, gone. But the water still has the smell of onions, doesn't it? It has the odor of onions, that light stain, that aroma, it remains. And so that would be what we call the cognitive afflictions, or cognitive obscurations. Yeah, that's right. Trying to pull all this up from memory, digging deep here. So that is still there, but we see things as they are. And so the way that they describe that in your personal experience would be that, in my really clear, concentrated state, I would see the non-dual nature of reality. But when I come out of meditation, or I come out of that, you all appear as independent and separate. I know you're not. So I don't get caught up in it. I don't identify with the body. But you appear. The appearances still arise as though they're real. But I know you're not real. So it's kind of like if you were aware in a dream, it's just a dream. You're not going to get caught up in that. To be fully enlightened, there's no dream. It's just pure enlightenment. And so even that light stain doesn't have appearances arise like that in your mind. They just don't arise. But the soft imprint of them are still there if you're just in a liberated state. So that's the idea. And the reason I'm giving you this now is because at the middle scope where we're at, it's about liberation. The great scope is about full enlightenment. So in order to have full enlightenment, they say that you really need, there's only one thing. It's bodhicitta, the great compassion. That's what's going to happen. So everything that we do is imbued with bodhicitta. But here at this stage, we're saying, okay, well, let's just focus on, liberation. Let's see, this is the intermediate scope. This is I don't want to be subject to rebirth and karma and being driven around by mental afflictions. And so in order to cut through that, we want to have a path. We want to have a path that works. And so we really want to pay attention to the teachings that we hear. And do those teachings directly supply an antidote to our real problem, our misperception? Or not? Because there's a lot of teachings out there. There's a lot of things that make us feel good. But is there something that's really directly addressing how I continually misperceive and label people and things and events? And if there's that teaching, that's good. So Buddhist teachings focused on that. But in order for that to happen, we need ethics. So 3 higher trains: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. These are the 3. And the way it's described, we'll use the axe and a tree analogy. How's that? You guys are like, what axe and tree? Okay. So they have all these great stories. Any of these commentaries, some of them are really old commentaries, but so this one's good though. The tree of ignorance is what's keeping us here. And if I want to be liberated, I want to cut it down. So what am I going to cut it with? I'm going to cut it with the axe of wisdom, right? So I need an axe that's wise, going to cut through that tree. But in order to cut it down, if I want to do it skillfully, I'm going to need to hit that spot again and again. And so they'd say that's going to be concentration. I'm going to develop this single-pointed mind that can just put my wisdom right there, again and again, and cut through the ignorance. So the axe and the concentrated, skillful method of cutting is concentration and wisdom. But in order to do that, I need a strong body. So I need a body that's going to be able to perform those tasks. And you only get that body with ethics. Ethics is the ground of all spiritual growth. Ethics is the substance from which we really get the strength, the mental strength, the ability to develop our wisdom and concentration. Without ethics, it's not going to happen. You can meditate all day long. You can focus on single-pointed concentration. And unless you've developed ethics, there's not going to be any fruition. There's just not going to be any fruition. The one common analogy that is used in Tugen Children talks about it. It's like concentrating and meditating on the nature of truth and then lying to your friends and neighbors during the day. It's counterproductive. It just doesn't work. And so here they want to say, at this point, at a middle scope, they're going to focus on the qualities of ethics and how that's going to sustain us. But the other trainings of concentration and wisdom, we're going to put in the great scope. We're going to say, well, why is that? Why not? Because all 3 take you to liberation. And what's going to happen is they're going to say that the order in which we develop this is ethics first, and then we go to the great scope and really work with bodhicitta, the great compassion. And we want to take the bodhicitta and have that just drench our development of wisdom and concentration, so that as we develop those, we're developing it with the idea of liberating all living beings, of a great compassion, and that leads to full enlightenment. So here at this point, it's more of a focus on the advantages of ethics, and then we go to the great scope and we really work with bodhicitta, concentration, wisdom. Now that doesn't mean that, well, hey, I shouldn't be meditating and being concentrated or working with wisdom. It's just saying, no, of course we do that now. Now you want to do that as much as possible as you walk in the world, to really try to see and watch how I label and project onto, whether it be a good meal, a friend, someone I don't like. Start to really think that they're that way. Start to observe that. We should do that all the time. But what we'll find is the more ethical we are, the more we're able to see those things more clearly, and we create a greater ability to develop our concentration. And a pretty straightforward test. When you do things you feel good about, ethically that you feel good about? Is it easier to concentrate? Sure. Do you have a little more peace? Sure. When you don't do things you feel good about, and you question and you agonize over, is it harder to concentrate? Yes. So it's pretty simple if we look at that. But here I like to try to work in some of the technical notes. So they would say that okay, this is the advantages of observing the higher training in ethics. That would be the way it's put. So what's preventing us from seeing things as they are? Our mental afflictions and our karmic imprints and the way we habitualize our mind. It's obscuring us seeing things as they are. So if I stop creating that negative karmic imprint, well, I'm going to see clear. So we want to get rid of these karmic imprints and mental afflictions. And the more we do that, the more we're able to really see things accurately. And so with this ethics, not only do we gain, a peace of mind and an ability to really develop our concentration and see more clearly, well, there's methods that are going to happen in terms of how we use our ethical way of being. And so by ethics, what they really want to say is our primary problem are the 10 non-virtuous actions. We've covered those a few times, right? 3 of the body, 4 of speech, 3 of mind. I know you guys can repeat them all real easy. So, but what they want to emphasize here is that there's some ways we can enhance that. So one of the ways, for example, is taking vows. So monks take vows, monastics vows, They have novice vows, they have full vows, they have lay people often when they become Buddhists, they take refuge vows, and there's 5 precepts. One of them, for example, would be, not to lie, not to steal, not to kill. Okay, so those are 3 right there. So they would say that a person who has taken a vow not to kill is going to create more merit by not killing than someone who hasn't taken the vow, which is kind of interesting. So if we're sitting in this room right now, and somebody here has a vow not to kill, and somebody else is sitting here who's just not killing, the one who took the vow is actually accumulating more positive potential. And you'd say, well, why is that? That didn't make sense. We're both not killing. And the idea is that the person who hasn't taken the vow hasn't really given a lot of thought about it. Right? It's just, I'm not killing anything. I'm sitting there in a Dharma talk. But the person who has taken a vow has consciously set an intention to not harm anything. And they've created a mental imprint already on not doing it. And they've automatically created an environment around them where whoever's around them is safe. Because when they're around that person's not going to harm anyone. And so there's a different mental imprint that we've created by consciously deciding not to do something. And then the other peace of mind is that I don't have to think about it in that sense. Like, I don't have to wonder. So, if it just clarifies things in my mind. If I have a vow not to kill, I'm going to try not to kill. If I see a spider in my house, I'm going to scoop it and take it out. I don't have to ponder some great truth when I see a spider. Should I kill? Should I not kill? What do I do? Whatever. It's like, I'm not going to kill it. I just do it. And so there's this other imprint that's actually creating merit by adhering to a vow we've already created. It's just kind of like tricks of the trade. Yeah, my teacher always had these ways that we can double and triple our merit, with our minds and how we think and perceive. And I'm always for the gravy train. If I can do that. If you visualize, when you do prostrations, you'd say visualize every atom of your body making prostrations. So there's thousands of prostrations going at once. And I'm on it. Rejoicing in the merit of others, which is really a great thing to do. Rejoicing in the merit of others. So other people do good, virtuous things. You rejoice in that merit. Guess what you just did? You created merit.
Don't you get rid of jealousy that way?
Well, yeah, that's on empathetic joy. That's the antidote to that. But at the same time, you're collecting merit.
Okay.
So you did something really cool, and I get merit.
because you are joyous over what I've done.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So do more good. I'll rejoice.
Okay.
I need the merit.
Okay.
But what happens is, so if you think of things in a different way, think of our habits and conditioning. And what we're doing is creating different habits and conditioning. So often I'll like to relate it to even what they find in science. So it's not so, esoteric in a sense. These things that we talk about, science is really working at discovering, and, so new neural pathways that we create. If I start relating to things differently, I'm actually creating new neural pathways. The neuroplasticity of the brain allows for change. So, but we'll notice that we have really strong habits. We have really strong pathways. When we see or even smell, let's say smell something of a memory, can't resist. Popcorn, for instance. Man, I'm on it. I'm hungry. Now, a minute ago, I wasn't hungry. I smell popcorn. Yeah, for me, that's just comfort food. I'm hungry. But I can start learning how to train my pathways differently. And I can start looking at situations. So by vows, you're consciously making a decision to live more ethically in a way that's more beneficial and helpful to others. And by consciously setting that imprint and then reinforcing it with a behavior, you're actually creating new neural pathways, right? But also, from a Buddhist point of view, you're creating new positive potentials. You're creating virtuous activity. You're creating merit. And so it really has a lot of juice behind it. Versus, well, you didn't think about killing or not killing. You're just not killing right now. So it's a different imprint. So in this path, we're looking at, in the 3 higher trainings, if I really want to develop my mind and develop a path to no more suffering, well, I really want to create a peace of mind in my own mind. A real sense of calm, a real sense of well-being. And that comes from living ethically. It comes from living in a way that you'll feel good about, that stops throwing dirt on my windshield, to use that analogy we use a lot. Right? I can't see clearly. And every now and then I do some good stuff, and then I go out and I throw some more dirt on my windshield. It's a real common practice we do, right? We go to the retreat, it's all good and blissful and wonderful, and I'm not even home yet. I'm already flipping people off on the highway. Right? And then I go, well, hey, I did that retreat, or I got that blessing, or I got that empowerment, and it's going to clarify everything for me. And then I go back to my behavior. Not going to work so well. The real power is changing our behavior. It's changing our mind stream with the conviction. With the conviction that says, I don't want to live that way anymore. I don't want to hurt people. I want to live in a way I feel good about. And again, this is something that in your own daily life you're going to find, well, you're going to feel better. Right? You're just going to feel better anyway. But on the path to enlightenment, this is the foundation. So they call this, in Tibetan Buddhism, the idea of a merit field. That this life that we live, we can create a field of merit, that every opportunity and every person and how we really set a strong motivation, we can accumulate a great deal of merit in every virtuous activity we do, rather than just good karma. And so that's by doing it consciously. It's by doing it consciously for the benefit of myself and all living beings. By doing things and attending to my daily activities, whether it's eating a meal. Am I eating a meal because it tastes good and I'm hungry? Or am I taking in nourishment for this body, this rare and precious human rebirth that can lead me to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings? Taking this nourishment in to heal and be well so I can help others. It's a different mental imprint. Am I calling to mind all the sentient beings that gave rise to this meal? All the beings that made this meal possible? And then setting intention to use this nourishment, to use this life that I have to liberate all beings. It's a different way of eating a meal, isn't it? So when we think about merit fields, there's this ways that we can bring our consciousness to our daily activities to cultivate incredible potentials in our life. And what it does is, trying to think, there's an analogy Tootin Chodron once. She called it like a currency. Like if you're doing business, you need some money. These positive potentials are the currency of the path to enlightenment, of, good, healthy actions provide us the nourishment to really succeed in this path and to make the best use of this body. And so we can just avoid doing things, but it's very different when you proactively do things. You can be doing the same thing and really cultivating merit and virtuous mental states. Or you could be doing the same things and just doing some good karma or some neutral karma. So the idea here is when we think about, I'm actually going to the big scope already, can't resist. I'm going to, but that's okay, it's all right though. Here it's just talking about the, there's just a lot of benefit of being ethical, of avoiding, angry mental states and things that muck up our windshield. And just by not participating in anger, resentment, jealousy, and harmful actions of killing, of stealing, of sexual misconduct, of harsh speech, of lying, of divisive speech, of idle gossip, of those are the 4 of the mind, 3 of body, and 4 of speech, 3 of body. Now 3 of mind is ill will, wrong views. What's the other one? Ill will. Covetousness. Covet what others have. Yeah. So just by avoiding those, you'll create space for things to flourish. Concentration and wisdom. The next step is really then bringing in the bodhicitta mind that maximizes all those things. And then if we do that with the ethics, our concentration and our wisdom can really take over. Really be imbued with that. So I was supposed to stay with the liberation, but I'm going to enlightenment. Sorry. Couldn't control myself. The other key point that was here that's technically made in the outline of the Lamrim is at this point, you're really, so technically we're in a section where it says, what's the type of body for enlightenment? What body gets you enlightened? And we've already kind of covered that in the preliminary, is the rare and precious human rebirth you have. So you already have the right body for enlightenment. So a human form, born in a land of lineage and Buddhist teachings, where they're present and available, where you have the ability and intelligence to become enlightened. You have all 18 factors right now. So, and this takes many lifetimes to get. And you have it right now. You have the body for enlightenment right now. It's not something to look at lightly. And with that body now, you can really cultivate the 3 higher trainings. So then in this teaching it would say, you want to be convinced of that path, and in that path is ethics, concentration, wisdom. And what we were just talking about in the outline is the advantages of living ethically. And then I kind of got into bodhicitta. Yeah. It's good to have bodhicitta. And then we can imbue that with this opportunity. So within the 3 higher trainings, let's say, because I always like to bring it back to the person who's non-Buddhist, who's just here. Would your life be better if you lived ethically, could focus your mind, and see things more clearly? You say, yeah, right. So the beauty of a Buddhist path is that as we work towards a goal of enlightenment, the actual path to enlightenment improves the quality of the life we live every day. We're ultimately asking you to invest in a path that allows you some more inner peace by living ethically. Take some mind to train your attention to actually go where you would like it. And then start actually living in the world that exists instead of the one I make up in my mind all day long and tell stories about. And you're going to find that your life right now gets a whole lot better. And now let's infuse that with a little bit of compassion for all living beings. Maximize that. And what you'll find is right now, today, your life will get 100% better. And you're on the path to enlightenment. All that for one low price. Yeah. So I'm going to pause right there and just see if anyone had any questions. I actually finished 3 minutes ahead of time instead of 10 minutes over. It could happen. Yes, Joanne.
Can enlightenment be given to you without study or shown to you?
Well, again, we're talking about liberation or enlightenment, and we had a bit of that topic yesterday. And for those of you online, the question was, can enlightenment be shown to you or given to you? And we would say, technically, full enlightenment no one can give that to you. You got to earn it. There's no way around it. Can there be a moment where someone, some great Lama or some being is able to give you a taste, a little momentary taste of non-dual, nature of reality, and that has been described. Yes, that's possible. There's practices where they say that certain lamas have been able to give someone just a quick taste of what that's like. Right. So last week that was a question as well, and it's funny because we all want the easy way, right? Come on, give it to me. And my teacher, Venerable Geshe Sultan Gelsen, he made a comment around that once where he said it's often really detrimental to people, and that if you're not ready, if you're not at the edge where you're ready for that you get a taste of how good things, the nature of reality, and it's too easy, it's like you don't work, And one of my other teachers, he just said it just might be just a really good memory you have for the rest of your life. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't give you the effort, because the only way to obtain full enlightenment or even liberation is through effort. It's through your ability to cultivate the 3 higher trainings, and there's no one that can remove that. So within the text that we're reading, it'll say the Buddhas can't give you liberation. If they could, they would. We'd all be liberated. The Buddhas want us to all be free of suffering. So in a heartbeat, they can't wash away our karma, they can't wash away our imprints, they can't do that. They can only show you the way. And the way is through the teachings and the path, and we have to do the work. But there have been stories and things talked about in certain particular practices where they talk about a little nudge of the taste of the non-dual nature of reality that people get. And they say if it's delivered at the right time, at the right place, in someone's development, it can put them over the edge. And in that sense, it's helpful. But generally, for most of us, we have so far to go that little taste isn't necessarily. And some people think of it, well, then it almost came too easy. And so they never develop the skill, the method, and the effort. Because it takes the biggest effort, I think, in my own personal experience, side note, is the effort to train the mind. Our mind is all over the place. I mean, what happens the moment you come out of meditation so often? Oh, yeah, done with that, man. I'm back. Let's start projecting and labeling. And where's that popcorn he was talking about? The mind's used to running the world in our thing and projecting and labeling and likes and dislikes and looking for shiny objects and things that taste good and feel good. It's running around, it's rampant. And it takes effort. It takes some effort to really get that attention balance. That's why, really strong meditative retreats, a lot of continuity of consciousness, or just remembering every single day that everything you say is meaningful. I mean, we get that if I tell you that, but we remember that, even 10 minutes from now. Our mind is a very busy place. And so unless we develop the ability to really direct that and bring a continuity of consciousness. So the idea ultimately is that you can become conscious of everything you do, not only throughout the day, but even in your sleep and in the waking hours. It's a full practice. And in order to do that, it takes effort. And nobody's going to give you that ability to concentrate like that. And the way that you really develop that concentration is what? Ethics. Ethics. Yeah, ethics. There's no other, that's really, you really nurture that concentration with ethics. And a lot of peace of mind that allows you more freedom to really attend to life in a meaningful way. And not in a stressful way. Now, that's the other thing as we kind of embark on this, as we wrap up here, is it doesn't help to get hung up on violating your ethics. That tight mind. Oops, I lied. Oh, I screwed that. Oh, look at all that karma. We don't want to be walking around like that with a little checkbook. Because that just really restricts. We're human, we're going to mess up. Okay, we're human, we're going to mess up. I might say something, I hurt somebody's feelings. I might, not do something very well. That's human. We want to take it seriously, but we don't want a heaviness around it. We got to know that, I have a conditioned mind. I'm going to screw up. Catch myself, and the best thing that we can do when I catch myself doing something I don't feel good about is not beat myself up. I'm creating more mental affliction. It's to recognize it and let go and vow to do it better next time. So for those of you who are doing a purification practice on Sunday, that's essentially what we'll be doing all day. What we'll do in a purification practice just makes sense. Is we call to mind things that we don't feel good about. Recognize the unskillful ways that harmed ourselves or others. No guilt, just that it wasn't very skillful. And really develop a sense of intelligent regret that, wow, I don't want to live like that. And then a resolve to not do it that way anymore. And then really doing an activity to offset that. So all day long, we'll have the opportunity to really purify karmic imprints that we have. And if you look at it just from a science point of view, is with our mind, our neural pathways, we'll call habits and tendencies that have not served us, and really look at them and see how they haven't served us, so we can develop ones that do. And so we'll get to do that for about 6 hours, really washing away these imprints and creating other ones. And that really gives us room to breathe. So while we want to be mindful of not harming others, not creating negative karmic imprints, we also want to be thoughtful about how we treat ourselves when we do, which is to be gentle, have an open mind, a spacious mind, not a rigid, mind. Now, one of my favorite quotes along this line is, "Never let your sense of morals prevent you from doing the right thing." We don't want to get hung up, and this is the rule. It's what's the right thing to do right now? And if I messed up, the right thing to do right now is to forgive myself and work on doing better. All right. Good. Well, we'll go ahead and do a little dedication. So, yeah, maybe I'll leave that. So we accumulated a lot of positive potential here. We set a really strong motivation. Now we'll dedicate this virtue and wisdom for the benefit of all beings. This is putting in the collective pool of merit for all sentient beings. So Alias, but really let's set a really strong intention to dedicate all of the merit and virtue we've accumulated for the benefit of all beings. I'll say some words along those lines. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom we've accumulated, both here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate it for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. May we be able to use the virtue and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to cultivate the 3 higher trainings, and imbue them with bodhicitta, so that we can obtain full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Okay, well, thank you all so much. A joy and an honor to be with you as always. To you online, thank you so much. May be well, may be happy, and as always, try to stay out of trouble. That's helpful. And again, if anyone wanted to get in on Meals with the Monks, Stephanie's there. And next Wednesday after the teaching, we'll have a volunteer meeting for hosting the crew. All right, be well. Thank you.